I think my first Frankenpen was yanking out a stiff, uninteresting Parker nib and cramming in a Waterman number 5 nib that was flexible. I always, when I went go to flea markets and things like that, this is before pen shows existed, and pens you could, and the interweb didn't exist, and TVs were in color, but that's about all. 5 channels. It was the olden days. Children ran around with hoops in the street, hitting them, and soapbox derbies. Well, no, it wasn't quite that old, but I remember buying some sort of senior Parker duofold. Could have been this one even. And the nib was just so unattractive. And I had I think a Waterman 100-year pen that had a broken end and a clip missing or something. And I yanked out that 100-year pen and put it in here. And I thought, okay, well, I much prefer this to the other nib. And I know you and you and you and you and you and you and you will assign me to some level of hell between the thieves and the gluttons and maybe the pedophiles. Somewhere in here is Frankenpen making. But I was able to use the nib and the pen, so I was happy. And customer of mine, or a friend of mine, he's never bought a pen from me, but he has a Waterman number 5 nib that's kicking around and wants a Waterman 55 without a nib. Well, I don't have any of those. In my parts bin, I have a lot of barrels, but the caps are all cracked or missing. And I thought, well, I hate the idea of this number 5 Waterman nib being ignored. So maybe I have a senior Schaefer that it could fit in, or a off-brand pen or something. Would that work? Of course, there's a heck of a lot of trial and error that goes into making a Frankenpen work. It somehow seems that more pen company nibs don't fit into anything other than a Moore. It's just the way they work. They're funny pens that way. But I thought maybe, just maybe, I might have an off-brand pen. Something. This is a Wardwright, I think, and I have a dip pen nib in it. But I probably have a couple of dozen pens that are sort of this size, senior sized pens that might work with a number 5 nib. But even a number 5 nib, where's a Waterman number 5? This might be a number 5. Even a Waterman number 5 nib that I take out of this Waterman number 5 may not fit in the other Waterman number 5 I have, because each feed is a little different. Each nib is, sometimes they're thicker in thickness. A firm nib is usually made of a thicker piece of gold, so you can press down really hard. So there's no guarantee that even if I took this nib out of this pen and sent this to him, he'd be able to make it work. But again, there's a nib just like this, or something like this, that's in California waiting for a home. So I may just send him a barrel and feed and section, and just so he can put it in the pen and see if he likes the nib, likes writing with the nib. It's so much fun making Frankenpens. Okay, what's going on here? I also thought, well, maybe I have a desk pen that he could put it in. This is a Waterman. I don't have any Waterman desk pens because I'm using them myself. I've got a dozen of them here, and there's a crystal ball that I have in my brain, and I can imagine sometime in the future Madame Zelinsky or Fatima or whatever the fortune teller's name might be, would say, "Here I see a desk with beautiful drawings on it, and I see you're using a pen, and all of the pens I see are desk pens," she'd say. Desk pens without holders, because that's all I need at the desk. I don't need a pen with a cap. I don't need this pen on my desk. This pen could be in your pocket or your pocket. This nib, though, I paid $200 for this nib. I paid $285 for the pen. And when the person that sold me this pen, I asked how much it would be, I thought he might say $85 or maybe $125. But he said $285. And he had me by the privates because he knew damn well that I was going to buy this pen. He could have said $2,085 and I might have thought it was okay. This nib is magnificent. I'm almost afraid to use it. So this nib will not leave my cold, dead hands. I'll have it buried with me. But this pen is lovely. But I don't need the pen. I need the nib. So this nib could be pulled out and put in a plain black pen with teeth marks and a name engraved and crossed out, and I'd be happy. But also, a desk pen like this at my desk is really all I need. I'm reminded of what's the Steve Martin movie where all I need is this paperweight. All I need is this paperweight and this ping pong paddle. All I need is, and then he, leaves the house with like a carload of things, none of which are very interesting, but that's all he needs. And this chair, all I need at a desk really is a desk pen. I don't need the holder because I've got this great filing cabinet thingy that has all of these drawers that are all full of pens. And I just slide out the drawer that I want. I know which drawer has the stub nibs, which drawer has the flexible nibs, and I grab the pen I want because I know them so well. But I don't need, there's how many drawers are there? There's 12 drawers. There's at least 180 pens on my desk in these drawers. Do I need 180? Probably not. I could probably do perfectly fine with maybe 100 pens at the desk. Maybe if I used certain pens just with red ink, I may need a few more, or maybe I could, this drawer is the red pen drawer and red ink drawer, and the ones on this side are fine and the ones on that side are broad, and it'll be sort of like the tool area in your garage where you've got the big wrench and the little wrench, the little baby wrench here, the bigger wrench, the mama wrench, and the papa wrench, all in a row, hanging on their little hooks. I could do the same with my pens. Except, of course, you know this as well as I, this nib is a little bit different than any other nib that's on my desk. There's just something a little different about this nib. They may all be extra fine in one drawer, or at one end of a drawer they might be all, but they're not exactly. One has a little tiny bit of a scratch, one has a little bit of tiny flex, and there's no two alike. What does this one do? This almost feels like kind of a stub. Wants to be a stub. But you've heard me talk about desk pens, the shape and the way your hand can go up and back and forth and all this kind of stuff, and how much fun that is to use rather than a pen with a cap. So I don't have to tell you that again, do I? Well, I'll tell it to you again. They're really great because your hand can go up and down and you can move the position and the balance, and you can draw way over here like this and your hand isn't in the way. Do I need to repeat that? So Madame Fatima might say, Pierre, I see 180 pens in your future, which means I have 4,100 pens to sell to you and you and you and you and you, or whatever the number is. Why is this pen here? I wonder. Why isn't this in my pens that on my desk that are perfectly complete? I think I'm going to slowly retire from my desk, and the ones that are on my desk will be the pens that have some sort of problem that I won't be able to sell so easily. For example, like this one. This is supposed to have a screw cap, but I don't have a screw cap for this pen. I have a slip cap that works perfectly fine to keep the nib safe. And here's another pen. Madame Fatima would say, and I also see a bunch of pens that are all broken and cracked and missing levers and stuff. And I say, yep, you're pretty good at what you do. Can you see a tall, dark, handsome man that's very wealthy in my future? Look a little harder. Can you find that for me? Just find one of those for me, Mr. Ma'am, please. My crystal ball is getting foggy, she'd say. I did buy or on eBay a few days ago a very small dip pen nib, which I didn't get. It was pretty inexpensive, so I didn't get screwed. But I think the iridium is almost gone from it, so its life expectancy is not great. I think the pens that are on my desk will have to have iridium. I think that's one of the only things I require. The ones, a pen in your collection or your collection or your collection that you just have in a case for people to ooh and ah over, they don't need iridium. I'll tell you what, I'll trade you 2 pens without iridium for 2 nibs without iridium for 1 nib that has iridium. That sounds like a deal. I once was part of a wedding group vendors that did things for weddings, and there was a cake maker or two, there was a calligrapher or two. In fact, there were sort of 2 of everything. They didn't want more than 2 of any particular vendor. 2 tux people, 2 wedding dress people, 2 cake people, 2 whatever people. And I really liked the limousine people. Well, one limousine person in particular. The other one I wasn't too fond of. On the back of her limousine, on the back window, or was like limousines for you.com, in big letters. And I said, is that on all of your cars? Oh yeah, we get a lot of business that way. And I thought, listen, that's not how you pitch something for someone's perfect day. The most perfect day in their entire life is to drive around with an advertisement on their ass. The other limousine company that I liked better, I saw their brochure, and their brochure was lovely. There was nothing wrong with it. Told what cars they had. They showed images of some of the cars they had, and they also, what you'd, VIPs, airport pickup, but they also had weddings, of course, and they had frat parties. The last thing that I, as a blushing bride, would want to see is my car being advertised, the car that I'm going to hire, advertised for use by a bunch of vomiting frat boys from Boston College. I mean, can you just imagine how much puke and other bodily fluids have been caked on the carpeting of that car? And no matter how hard you clean, I watch my forensic TV shows, there's always one little particle of something or other that they can link to the football player or the whoever else, the bride or the groom or the best man and the groom. Mind in the gutter, Pierre Gustafson. I got sidetracked, but when they were giving their talk about the company that, and the owner of the company loved cars. He loved cars. He loved driving his cars, and he loved fixing the cars. And they talked about how each of their chauffeurs has a emergency kit in their glove box, and it wasn't like, you know, a wrench and a flashlight. It was a needle and thread in case the bride's dress gets a little torn or something as she's walking out of the church. The groom, I mean, the chauffeur can, you know, get out the needle and thread and hem it up for her. So I really loved everything they were saying. And just this guy loved cars as much as I love pens, except when he said the Rolls Royce they had, this white, which I think is kind of tacky, this white Rolls Royce from 1959 or something. He said, "Yeah, we took out the Rolls Royce engine and put in a Ford engine," and my heart sank like a rock. And he said, "Well, the reason we do that is if the car needs a repair, we can get it repaired immediately. We don't have to wait for England to ship over the carburetor." But that seems to be, that's what it's like when I see a pen collection. It's all for looks. It's not about how they work. And when I see a pen collection in a case, or people show them on Facebook, and you know, they're beautiful pens, but for God's sake, how does the nib work? Let me see that. I ask people on the Facebook pages, you know, show how the pen works. And there's a couple people that do, and one guy is a very talented cartoonist, I think, drawer. I can't remember if he's a cartoonist or a drawer. And he would do this beautiful picture, and he'd put the pen down, and he'd take a picture of the pen and the drawing he made, and no one commented on the drawing. It was all just about the pen, and he was very hurt by it, and I would have been too, I guess. I mean, I know what to expect from pen collectors, that they don't really care how the pen writes. Many of them don't care how they write, but it's like, it's just wrong, just as wrong as that Rolls Royce car with the Ford Mercury or whatever V8, whatever kind of motor is in a Ford. Just seemed wrong. Probably, I can hear you saying, well, Pierre, that's what your Frankenpens are. I almost drank this. This is not coffee, Per Gustafson. This is coffee. So I realize my Frankenpens are kind of like the Rolls Royce with the Ford motor, but the other way, it's more the other way around. It's a Ford with a Rolls Royce motor in it. I usually put a really nice nib in my Frankenpens. Is anyone going to say anything in my live chat? Have I lost my mojo? Have I offended any of you yet enough to say something? Yes, it's lovely when I can put the correct nib in the correct pen and carry it around with me. And it's nice when the pen is in perfect shape. But even with great care, a pen that's being used and in your hand could fall out of your hand and could perhaps somehow get broken. So I understand that. But we're all doomed. There's an asteroid with Earth's name on it that's coming right at us at 17,000 kilometers an hour. So we're doomed. These things are not going to last forever. And looking at the news, they might not even last a week. Can you imagine what would be happening now if the Trumpster was still in power? We would be, Russians would be, here's Ukraine. Russians are over here, their hammer and the sickle, whatever it looks like. And the US is over here with their tanks, and we'd be both bombing the smithereens out of Ukraine because I love Putin. Putin is great. And we'd split it up. There'd be a little DMZ with a Trump hotel on either side. That's what would be happening. Could someone just put Trump out of our misery? I'm not asking for any sort of assassination, of course, because I don't want to be thrown in jail for inciting a riot. I don't want that, but I just want him finally to be exposed as the buffoon that he was and is. Selfish. He'd like to think of himself as a Rolls Royce with a Rolls Royce engine, but he's a beat up. He's still, the outside, it still has to look elegant. It's a gold plated Bugatti. But on the inside, there's no heart, there's no nothing. There's maybe two chipmunks, gerbils in a cage that make the car go. Why is this pen in here? This has a bent nib that I might be able to make slightly less bent, but it works so well right now that I don't want to risk screwing it up by trying to make it better. It's very snappy. When you bend and mold and burnish and do all that sort of stuff with any piece of metal, the metal can get weaker. And so when I get a pen that, even if it looks bent, well, it is bent. It looks bent because it is bent. If I can get the tines close together where the very tip of the iridium is close together and there's a tight slit between the tines so there's no ink that gets stuck here without going any further. You don't want to have a gap because the capillary action won't work. So this pen seems to function, and if I were to try to make it look a little better, there's always a chance that I might screw it up. I wonder if this pen would hold a number 5 for my friend in California. might. This is some sort of off-brand European pen button fill thing, like a dual fold, but it's functional. Seems I've got another one of those kicking around. I have a meeting to go to with our gallery director. I had a job for a couple of months being the gallery director in our building while the board was looking for a new permanent director, and the permanent director turns out has to have some surgery, so it looks like I might need to be part of the process a little more, which is fine. The next show that is going to be in the gallery is something that I sort of concocted. So I have an idea of how I want the show to look anyway. So I suppose it's good that she and I call this show the Clusterfuck Show, because it might, in fact, be a clusterfuck. But I think she's happy to have me. I mean, she sort of said, "This is your show. This is your clusterfuck. You can figure out how it's going to work." And I'm happy to do that. I have an idea in my head how I want to display the pieces. Oh, okay. I said this is an extra fine. What's it doing here? But it's the extra fine drawer. So it should be exactly where it is. Anyway, I don't know what I wanted to say any further. I haven't figured it out yet, so maybe I should just call it a day. Why is this scratchy? It seems to me this is scratchy for a good reason. No, it's just scratchy because it's a really sharp, I thought it was missing its iridium. It has iridium, but it's really a sharp side stroke. Sometimes you see illuminated manuscripts and they have writing in Germanic script that maybe is that tall. And this wants to write that small. It's writing about twice as big as it should, but it's a very, very sharp side stroke on that one. Another Waterman. Waterman number 4 with a stub nib. This is about twice what the other one is. It's twice as fat in both directions. Is this the one I just tried? Okay, here are 3 Waterman that are in the stub drawer. That's daddy, that's mommy, this is baby. Well, maybe not. Maybe the other one is baby. Oh, wow. Here's daddy. Daddy. Daddy bear. Daddy stub. Mommy. And baby. I have grandpa in here somewhere. It's a broken nib. Here it is. Here's grandpa. Hello, Scraff. Um, but this is missing the top quarter of the pen nib. It was broken off badly, so I filed it down to make it even and came up with a big broad nib. But I'm just writing on the gold, not on the iridium, so it will have a soft feel to it. It doesn't have the bite of iridium, but it also will wear down over time. But if I used it every day for the rest of my life, it probably wouldn't wear down all that much. So Frankenpens, the first, the easiest Frankenpen and the first one I ever made, Scraff, was a Parker dual-fold senior that I crammed a Waterman nib into. Yanked out the very unpleasant Parker nib and put a flexible nib in it. So that got me started. Most of the Frankenpens I make, though, when I speak of a Frankenpen myself, I'm thinking of the ones that I put the, come on, work, damn you. Why aren't you working? Why is this not, it's full of ink. That I put Victorian dip nibs into. Range. So weak. I mean, the pen, you think about making a thick line and the pen will do it. You don't even have to apply hardly any pressure. Well, I buy them online. Well, and flea markets, and I've been collecting pens for 50 years or 40 years. So I've got 40 years of finding these things. But I recently bought one on eBay. Do a search for Victorian dip nibs. Victorian, rather, dip pens, and you'll see a dozen of them, and they're going to be expensive. I mean, many of them are expensive because there are some people that collect these things as finished pens, and they love the way they write or the way they look. And but you can sometimes find them, bid on them, and buy a nib for 30, 40, 50 bucks maybe. I paid $120 for one of them. Buy it now, and it looked like it was going to be great, but it was missing its iridium. So it was $125 wasted. And the one I bought recently for $15 plus $5 shipping or some, I was the high bidder, and I was surprised it went that cheaply, but it doesn't work very well. It's worth the money I paid for it, but I think the iridium is almost gone on it. So well, you can get a vintage pen for 120. And even if you get a vintage pen that has a beautiful flexible nib on it, the Victorian era dip pen nibs that are gold have this quality that very few fountain pens have. I might have a couple of dozen fountain pens that have the quality that I'm looking for in a Frankenpen dip pen nib. And I'll explain it to you very, very easily, I guess. When you have a downstroke, here's your letter coming down. It's shaded. You press down, and then you start lifting up. And a dip pen nib goes back to 0. It goes from 0 to 60, and it goes right back to 0. Right here. Sorry, right here. A fountain pen can go from 0 to 60, just like this one did, but on the way back, for some reason, the shape of the nib, I think, the shape of the ball of the nib is made slightly differently. So the snapping back, even if the tines go together, even if the tines snap right back together, which they do, there's some extra ink that's still on the ball of the nib. And rarely do you get a fountain pen that can do this. Most of them, I mean, all of them seem to do this. Some of them will do that. So but the Victorian dip pen nibs, and the only thing I can think of is the shape of the nib must be somehow different. Rather than being rounded, it must be somehow slightly more pointed or something. I don't know what it is. I think I need to get an electron microscope to figure it out. The pen that I paid so much money for, this one, has this quality that I like. It goes right back to 0 really, really fast, where normally a flexible nib like this Schaefer there's this little bit of thickness, and it looks sloppy. Well, it's the gold that makes it flexible. And it's more the thinness of the thinness of the piece of metal. And I suppose the way it's tempered, and there's all sorts of other things. I'm not a physicist or a metallurgist to know exactly what it is, but the cutouts, I've seen one vintage pen. It was the first one I bought from the pen shop I now own. Had cutouts in the nib, and it had 2 little cutouts right there and there, and these were factory made. And that just made that end just all that much more flexible. And that was another pen that did this, I think. Though it hit a snag on a piece of paper and it broke like this. So then I no longer have the nib, unfortunately. Well, yes, there are other metals. I don't know what they are, and I don't know. I think the flexibility does not, though, necessarily come from the alloys that are mixed with it. I think the recipe for nibs were always the same in a particular company, or even, I don't know this though, but someone else would have to explain it to you because I don't know. But the but if you can find a Victorian dip pen nib that's made of gold that has iridium, you might be able to see what I'm talking about and feel what I'm talking about. Well, no, they don't make anything like they don't make anything like they used to. The phone I had in 1972 worked perfectly fine for 30 years before 1972 and for 30 years after 1972. The camera that I had worked okay too, and probably still does, but then some bonehead decided to put a camera on a phone, and they don't work very well anymore. They work perfectly fine for a year or two before they're all outmoded. So the flexible pen was a Schaefer. Yeah. I have lots of Schaefer pens that have flexible nibs, and that's because I've been looking for them and keeping them. The ones that I find, almost every single Schaefer that had a flexible nib I've kept. And so I have a lot of them, but they are very rare. Well, they're rare. You'll see one in 50 maybe at a pen show, random pen show, where people don't pay any attention to the nibs. And if you uncap the first 50 Schaefers, one of those might be flexible. Yeah, the cigar shape is a nice pen. Whereas if you are at a pen show and you find Watermans, if you take the cap off of the first 50 Watermans, you look at, a good half of them will be flexible. If you uncap the first 50 Conklins, a good half of them will be flexible, or more even, for Watermans too. Parkers, they were sort of all over the map. Wall Eversharps, they're pretty more flexible than not. Well, a pen show is like any other trade show you've been to, whether it be Comic-Con or antique paperweight show or even a flea market. Imagine you're at a flea market and everything is, I mean, imagine the last flea market you went to. You know, this person is selling modern tube socks made in China. This person is selling the shit they just inherited from grandpa. This person is selling only Fiesta wear. This person is selling old tools. This person is selling a little bit of everything, just stuff that they think they can flip for. And that's what a pen show is like. You'll have people that sell only modern pens, people that sell shitty modern shitty modern pens. You'll see someone that's selling only one brand of modern pens that might be good and might be shitty. The antique dealers, though, the people that sell the vintage pens, they are equally different. But chances are I've been to many, many pen shows, and I know which dealer is the one that I want to go to. And I might go to this dealer because I don't buy any of the pens that they have out on their table because they're selling pens that are, many hundreds of dollars, and I don't need those pens. But I look in their junk boxes because I'm looking for a nib, and they'd be able to sell, these things cheaply. Then there's someone that sells pens that are fully functional and are guaranteed to work, and I know that they are going to have at least one or two pens that I really want. Whether I want to buy them from them or not, I don't know, but they know their pens, they know what I want. So I go there and we conduct business at some point. This person has only gold overlay, very expensive pens that are $1,000 or more, and they're in a glass case. And I just I'm nice to them. I say, "Oh, that's a lovely pen." I usually point to something that I like, and I'll ask them, "It's nice seeing you again. How's your wife? How's your son? How's your whatever?" I'll be polite to them, but I'm not going to buy anything from them. Then there's this person. Who's this? This is someone who always has pens I buy from. And I'm thinking of a particular person that I buy pens from. He has maybe 30 pens at his table only, not 300 or 500 or 1,000. He has 30, and they're all priced very well. They usually have some, quote, flaw that most pen collectors don't want. And that flaw is that many of them have names on them. And that doesn't bother me at all. So I go to his table and I buy usually 6 or 7 pens from him because I like the pens he sells. This person, I just don't like the way he looks. So I just walk. He might have all sorts of good stuff, but I'm just going to walk past him. This person sells only flexible nibs. And this is a real person I'm talking about here. And I don't buy from him, even though I want every single pen that he has. He wants a lot of money for them. This pen that I bought for $285 from Rob Morrison, this guy might have for $385. He knows and puts a really high value, even higher than I might, on a flexible nib. And every pen of his is lovely. He sells lots of pens, but they're just a little bit too high for my tastes. And they also they're really lovely pens. Maybe he sells pens that are also in very pristine shape. They don't have names on them. They don't have plating wear. They don't have tooth marks. I mean, I think he sells good things, and they're worth the money, but they're just too expensive for me. This person, there's always someone at a pen show that knows a little bit about these pens on his desk, but he really doesn't know anything about these. And it's not like I'm looking for a bargain here, but this person might have, this is like the antique dealer that just inherited a house full of tchotchkes. They're not cheap, and they might actually be overpriced, but there's such a mix of stuff that there might be something that you've never seen before in here. And it might not be very valuable, but it might be something you've never seen before. And these tables are fun because they're not specialized at all. This was a randomness to this table, which is fun. Well, the guy I'm thinking about is a guy he was a really neat old man. He's no longer living, and he was this old Yankee, so he was a cheap skate. I'm sure he didn't pay more than $2 for any pen at his table, and yet he had his pens priced at quite a lot of money. So I didn't buy a lot from him because they were in fact overpriced. I could walk to any table in the room and buy the same thing he was selling for maybe a little less. But I loved the way he labeled his little pen trays. This one was biggies, not senior sized fountain pens or senior Schaeffers. They were biggies. So any pen that was big, he would put in a tray. And then he have another tray that had some other name that was vaguely descriptive, but a term that a fountain pen dealer would never use. And but it was always fun going to his table, and I usually see something I'd never seen before, and I might buy it if it struck my fancy. But there is a. I remember talking to Susan Worth, who had she's no longer living either, but she had a table that was always very busy. She was like me, selling pens to users, and she had a clientele that would come back every year to see her stuff. And she sold pens mainly, she loved stub-nibbed pens, and that was her shtick, and she had her following. She also loved Parker pens, so there were a lot of Parker pens at her table, and mainly pens from the 60s, 50s and 60s, 70s even. So she had a niche, and she also sold pens to people that use them. And why am I bringing her up? There was a reason for this. God damn it, what is it? Something about Susan Worth. What would it be? What would it have been? There was a point to this diatribe. Oh, I remember. She always wanted to have Boston have a 3-day show. She wanted to have a 3-day show because she wanted her customers to buy a pen on Friday, go home, tell all their friends about it So they'd come back on Saturday and buy more pens from her. And I said, well, Susan, most people that go to a pen show, like most people that go to a flea market, I said, when I go to an antique show or a flea market, I don't need to see every table. I'm looking for pens. I'm not going to go to the vendor that has a bunch of furniture or kerosene lamps or Victrolas. I'm going to go to the person that has the case on the table, that has old pocket watches and stuff, because they might have a couple of pens. And she said, yes, I know that, but that you can sort of see from afar. And I said, well, at the pen show, I'm the same way. I don't ever go to XYZ's table because his pens are too expensive. I don't go to any of the people that sell modern pens. So they're gone. So there's, at any given show, you will find that there are 3 people that you want to visit immediately. And then when you're done with them, you might look at a couple of other people. And you'll know which ones to go to. So anyway, I now have to get ready for my meeting. So I'll see you later. Be good. Stay safe. Bye-bye.